What if the woman you tried to embarrass turned out to speak the language of your heart better than you ever could? The luxury restaurant glowed under chandeliers that looked like they'd fallen from the stars. Laughter filled the air, mixed with the clinking of glasses and the quiet hum of wealth. At the far table sat Daniel King, the arrogant billionaire known as much for his empire as his ego. His words were sharp, his confidence unmatched. He leaned back in his chair, bored as his associates, discussed business that never really interested him. What he loved most was being in control, watching people stumble under his charm or his cruelty. At the next moment, a waitress approached her tray. Balanced perfectly, her smile polite, though her eyes carried a tired kindness. Her name tag read Layla. Daniel glanced at her once without really seeing her. "Water, please," he said sharply. "And hurry, we've been waiting forever." She nodded. "Of course, sir," and walked away calm, despite his tone when she returned and gently placed the glass before him. One of his business partners whispered something in his ear in Arabic, the words low and mocking. Daniel laughed loud enough for her to hear, repeating the man's words with a cruel grin. "I hope she at least understands she's slow," he said in the same language as the table chuckled. Layla froze for a moment, then looked at him directly, her expression steady, her voice calm and clear as she answered in flawless Arabic. "I understand perfectly, sir, and if I'm slow, perhaps it's because I carry more grace than the speed your manners lack." The entire table went silent. Daniel's smile vanished. His eyes widened as the weight of her words landed. The men around him shifted uncomfortably. One muttered under his breath, embarrassed by the sudden turn. Daniel stared at her, unable to respond. For the first time in years, his arrogance had met its match. She bowed slightly, still composed, and said in English, "Anything else, sir?" He didn't answer. He just watched her walk away, his chest tight with something unfamiliar. Not anger, not humiliation. Something closer to respect and curiosity. For the first time, he wondered who she really was. The rest of the dinner passed in uneasy silence. Daniel barely touched his food, his mind replaying the sound of her voice, calm, firm, unshaken. By his arrogance, every time he looked up, he saw her moving gracefully from table to table, her eyes focused, her posture proud. She didn't look at him again, but somehow that made it worse. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by someone. He'd insulted the men at his table, tried to change the subject, but the mood had shifted completely. The laughter gone, replaced by a strange sense of shame that even Daniel couldn't brush off when the evening ended and the guests began to leave. Daniel lingered near the counter waiting for her. She was counting tips, quietly humming under her breath. He stepped closer, clearing his throat. She didn't look up. "Can I help you, sir?" He hesitated. "I wanted to apologize." She looked at him, then expression, calm but cold. "For which part? Calling me slow or assuming I wouldn't understand?" He sighed. "I deserve that." She tilted her head slightly. "You don't need to apologize to me, sir. You just need to learn that language isn't what defines intelligence. Respect does." Her words hit harder than any insult he'd ever heard. He said softly, "You speak Arabic beautifully." She nodded. "My mother's Egyptian. My father taught me never to let anyone make me feel smaller for knowing more." Daniel's voice lowered. "And what do you do besides work here?" She smiled faintly. "I'm finishing my degree in international relations and teaching Arabic part-time." He blinked, surprised. "You're a teacher?" She nodded. "I teach people how to listen." He laughed softly. "That's something I clearly failed at." The next morning, he couldn't get her out of his mind during his board meeting. His thoughts kept drifting back to that moment, her tone, her poise, the way she spoke truth without raising her voice. When the meeting ended, he called his assistant. "Find out which university Layla works at." His assistant raised an eyebrow. "Sir, may I ask why?" Daniel smirked. "Because for once I'd like to learn something that actually matters." That evening, he walked into the small classroom where she taught 10 students sitting in a circle. She looked up, shocked to see him standing by the door. "Mr. King, what are you doing here?" He smiled humbly. "I came to learn Arabic." She stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "I don't think you need a new language, you need a new heart." He nodded. "Maybe both." Weeks passed and Daniel kept showing up every evening, sitting quietly at the back of Layla's class, surrounded by students half his age. He made mistakes, mixed up Words forgot grammar and earned more laughter than praise, but he never quit. Layla at first thought he was doing it out of guilt, but soon she realized something had shifted inside him. He listened more than he spoke. He no longer interrupted or mocked. He tried to understand every word, every meaning. One night after class he stayed behind while she gathered her books. He said softly, "You know, I thought learning Arabic would be about words, but it's really about humility." She smiled faintly. Maybe both. He looked down, then met her eyes again. "The night at the restaurant, you didn't just embarrass me. You reminded me what power sounds like when it's used right." She tilted her head gently. "I didn't want to embarrass you. I just wanted you to hear yourself." He nodded. "And I did every day since." Layla smiled slightly. "You've changed a lot, Mr. King," he chuckled. "Call me Daniel." She crossed her arms, teasing, "I don't call my students by first name." He grinned. "Then maybe call me a friend." She paused, considering it, then said softly, "Maybe you've earned that." From that day forward, they spoke more openly between lessons. He'd tell her stories of his travels and how lonely wealth could feel. She told him about her mother who taught, her kindness before grammar, and her dream to start a cultural foundation that connected people through language one evening. He said quietly, "I could fund that." Her smile faded. "I don't want charity, Daniel. I want partnership." He grinned. "Then we'll build it together." Months later, the Bridge Foundation opened its doors, offering free language and cultural classes for underprivileged students. The press called it another success for Daniel King, but he corrected them every time, saying it wasn't his idea, it was hers on opening day. He stood beside her as she gave her speech, switching smoothly between English and Arabic. He looked at her with quiet pride, whispering under his breath, "You taught me more than words. You taught me humanity after." The ceremony, as the crowd thinned, he said softly, "You know that night at the restaurant I thought I was the one with all the power?" She smiled, and now he said, "Now I know who really had it." She laughed gently. Maybe power was never the point. Daniel. Maybe it was understanding. He nodded, his voice warm and low. "Then I'm glad I finally learned the right language." A year later, the world had changed for both of them. The foundation had grown beyond what either of them expected. Classrooms in 3 cities, volunteers teaching every day, the walls painted with quotes about empathy and unity. And on the largest wall, written in Arabic, were the same words Layla had once told him, "Respect speaks every language." Daniel walked through the building, one morning watching students from different countries laughing together, his chest filled with something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Layla entered the room, carrying coffee for both of them, smiling as always, late again. He teased. She laughed. "I was teaching someone who refused to leave until he pronounced muhabba correctly." He grinned. "That means love, right?" She nodded. "And patience." She raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you should learn that one too." He chuckled. "I'm trying." She handed him the cup and said softly, "You've become the man I thought you could be that night." Daniel's expression softened. "You mean the night I embarrassed myself?" She smiled. "No. The night you listened for the first time." They sat near the window watching the students. "Below the city outside, humming with life," she said quietly. "Do you ever miss it?" He frowned. "Miss what?" She smiled. "The noise, the ego, the world, where you were untouchable." He shook his head. "No, I don't miss being untouchable. I like feeling human." She looked at him, her eyes warm and proud. "Maybe that's the real language we were both meant to speak." He smiled. "I think we already are." Silence fell between them, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then he said softly, "You know, I built an empire. Out of money, but this foundation, this was built out of you." She blushed slightly. "Don't say things you don't mean." He shook his head. "I've never meant anything more. You showed me that respect isn't learned in boardrooms, it's taught through grace, and you are the best teacher I've ever had." Layla looked down at her coffee, then back up, her voice a whisper. "Daniel, what do you really want from all this?" He smiled gently. "Just time. Time to keep learning from you. Time to see what we can build next together. And that night, as they closed the doors to their foundation and walked into the cool air, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. They walked quietly down the street. Two people who had once met through arrogance, now bound. By understanding, the same man who mocked a waitress, now holding the hand of the woman who taught him the language of humility and love. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings.